framework that we're setting up, the competency framework and things, just so that you can get a sense of how we're approaching particularly the academic side of it. And would love kind of any feedback, questions, thoughts, suggestions, etc. as we go through. So as part of this, the purpose of this is to hopefully keep you up to date a bit on where we are, and to get some feedback from you as we approach in April our launch for the alpha course, so a trial of the first course that we're wanting to just basically test all the different parts of the system on. So, and if you're not talking, it's probably a good idea to mute. Sometimes we get echo or background noise. Okay. So here's the kind of, if we're talking about unmet needs, what's one of the main needs that we're trying to engage in the market? When IBM did their CEO survey, the big theme that came out was what they called hypercomplexity. So the leaders, 1,700 leaders of the day, are saying the main thing that we're struggling with is how to deal with this complexity of change, where things are moving faster and faster, and it's all less unpredictable. And they're basically saying we're not getting the qualities and competencies we need to be able to help us navigate this time. You know, it's getting more and more into the mainstream, this story. There's the Forbes story on online education. That's from the Khan Academy. It's back end of 2012. The CEO study there, and then McKinsey's research into education, all basically telling the same things, that we're in a different kind of society at the moment. Things are changing quickly, and we're not getting what we need from the employer perspective, but the students are also saying the same, and particularly in the US, they're really doubting whether going into the amount of debt which they're required to go into now is really worth it, given that they often experience their education as not providing them with the kind of competencies they need to deal with the world today. That was the kind of, this is the top 10 global skills that they say CEO studies, but it was actually leaders in general, so it was across public sector and NGO as well. These were the top skills that they needed: collaboration, communication, creativity, flexibility, systems thinking, critical thinking, global orientation. You know, many of which, as we look at those, are simply not accessible purely through the cognitive dimension, which is why our kind of whole brain, whole system approach is designed to deal with and engage some of these skills that they're after. Again, there's the research looked into what percentage of employers, or the percentage of jobs are employers saying that they can't find people with appropriate skills for, and it's, you know, China up to 74%, through to UK, US down in the 20s. But still a very significant number of a significant gap between what employers want and what the market's able to provide at the moment. So we've kind of drawn inspiration from two sources as we've looked to develop the whole brain, whole system learning. In terms of existing initiatives, obviously Integral as a conceptual framework for theory and practice has informed us a lot. But looking at, you know, the 8 years that we run Wisdom University, where we developed an approach to pedagogy that really engaged all the different parts of the student in transformational learning. And then the Illinois Maths and Science Academy, Stephanie Pace Marshall was based, who's on our board, which she founded and ran for 20 years, which produced some extremely high quality graduates, including founders of Yelp and PayPal, amongst others. She developed a very specific approach to learning, which was inquiry-based, driven by competencies, really a whole systems approach, and encouraged that kind of thinking as well. So we've drawn a lot of inspiration from those two pieces to inform how we design the pedagogy at Ubiquity. This comes out of the work of Clayton Christensen and his stuff on disruptive innovation. And the kind of three lower ones on teacher-led online and tutoring were ones he identified in education, saying that, you know, you had teacher-led courses which got to a certain level of performance. And then when you combine that with online, it took you to another level of performance. When you added then the tutoring tools in, so they got more one-on-one support, it took us to another level. And we're suggesting that when you take an integral whole system approach and you build in the ability to deal with hypercomplexity, it actually takes it to a whole nother level of performance, ability, and customization in education. So we've been looking a lot at Christensen's work and how we position ourselves in relationship to the stuff he's done already. So whole brain, whole system is a theme which you've kind of heard from the beginning. Problem-centered, really looking at, okay, so there's these challenges in the world at this time. What are the skills, competencies, qualities, etc. we need to engage them? Inquiry-based, not just looking for the quick solutions, but really looking for the right questions to be asking. What are the key competencies we need to develop? And obviously building that all in an integral framework and also an integral learning experience, which I'll say a bit more about in a minute. Down here, these are the Oculus Rift goggles you can see in the lower right, which many of you will probably be familiar with, and what a very cheap version of virtual reality, cheap but high quality. So very quickly, the virtual reality immersive experience is going to be very affordable and accessible to people. And in terms of creating a next level of embodied learning, that's kind of where it's headed, and very much where we're designing Ubiquity to end up. You know, when Griffin, our Chief Technology Officer, put me on the Oculus Rift on a simulator for a fairground ride, I was just sitting on the chair, but my whole body and whole system responded as if I was there, because there's no screen anymore. You really are completely immersed. And I began to see the potential, really, in that environment for much more embodied learning. Obviously, won't completely replace the in-person, but it's certainly a step up than just having a screen in front of you. So that's where, you know, we've got that on the horizon as we're designing at the moment. This Eche put together for us, and it's just a nice summary of the different elements. So I just take a moment to talk through them, because it'll help you get a sense of how we're framing Ubiquity at the moment. So what is Ubiquity? A social learning and innovation platform where educators of the emerging paradigm meet students, change agents, entrepreneurs, and leaders. And a competency-based, degree-granting, collaborative university, and a lifelong learning platform, and a global collaboration platform. And how do we do that? With emerging paradigm courses offered through cutting-edge change organizations and thought leaders, together with a unique pedagogy that allows competency-based learning across the courses, which allows ubiquitizing the learner's experience, no matter the mix of courses they might choose to do, through the online platform and on the ground experience. Who are we serving? Students, change agents, entrepreneurs, leaders on the client side, and then resourcing also organizations and thought leaders who are serving the emerging paradigm on the content provider side. And then why reflects a bit of what I just talked about, because the traditional educational system isn't providing the appropriate skills. There's much healing on a personal, collective, and systems level necessary if we want to have a future on Earth as the human species. And because unprecedented social collaboration and innovation are needed to create the new models that make the old models obsolete. So that's kind of, in words, quite a nice summary. Thank you very much, Eche, of how Ubiquity is shaping up at the moment. Paul has done a lot of work on the brand story recently, and this is one of the slides that has come out of that deck. Our purpose as Ubiquity is to liberate human purpose, to create a whole new kind of world, a world that works for everyone. Our core social function is to ignite, nurture, and equip the crazy ones, misfits, rebels. Quote, of course, from the Jobs video. with the real world skills, mindset, and mentors they need to go the whole way. So there's a number of snippets in that we're using, referring to a lot and kind of making part of the branding, such as a whole new kind of education for a whole new kind of world, a world that works for everyone, go the whole way, are all kind of little slogans, I guess, that we're putting out there at the moment. A whole new kind of education for a whole new kind of world, a world that works for everyone. So how are we going about this then? Whole brain, whole system, as I've been saying. And as you should be familiar with, hopefully by now, is that we're working with these three core elements of the design. Oops, time to take a break. The study piece, the hands-on change projects, and the personal development. So really trying to integrate the more head-based study of material with actually trying to apply it all to change contexts that we're engaged in, together with working on our own interior development. So that's reflected itself, you know, in more detail, in these three elements here. Study, personal development, mission. So the study involving, you know, the lectures, tasks, research, etc., discussion. Personal development, looking at a set of life competencies, experiential exercises through the personal development modules, and coaching and mentoring support. And then the missions is both change projects that people will do during the course, as well as a longer learning journey and the possibilities, particularly in the final year for bachelor students, of internships. So this is how we kind of building up the whole degree structure, you could say, for the undergraduate. So there's going to be 8 general education kind of core courses, you could say, and I'll show you how that looks for our first bachelor's in a sec. 14 courses in a particular concentration, and then 13 other electives, which they can choose from all the available courses that have been produced so far. And then in the final semester, they can either go on a special assignment, which involves an internship or developing their own social enterprise, or if they don't want to do that, they can take 5 more courses of their choice. So that special assignment would be the equivalent to 15 credits. And for each of the courses they take, there will be roughly 12.5 hours a lecture. So for each of the 15 modules, you know, you've all had to work this out in your various syllabi and things when you put them together. About 50 minutes of pre-recorded video per week, which we've chunked down into 4. So there's about 12, 13-minute segments. And then within each module, they carry out a number of tasks. And they're more formative assessment tasks, like quizzes and journaling, that help them to integrate the learning. And then there'll be discussion through the forums and things, peer review exercise, the creative assignments, which are actually the ones that we're going to assess properly with the text-based rubric system that I'll show you in a minute, and then the research and study. So this is focusing particularly on the study piece, what that's composed of in the course. Here's the longer-term vision that you probably saw maybe a year ago or so now, which has our core courses, and we started off with these 3 different schools, areas, and the idea for 15 different departments. Big vision at the top, and then after we'd submitted our first proposal to the BPPE, and they said, well, if you're going to do all of that, you need to have all of the courses worked out, and you need to have for each of these departments, and you need to have faculty signed up for everything. We kind of took a step back and decided, okay, let's just do one at a time. Let's just start with one of these and then build it out from there. So we chose to start with social innovation and entrepreneurship because that was closest to our kind of core value proposition in a way. So this is what that looks like in terms of courses. We've gone for 40 courses, which is the minimum needed to be able to deliver a BA and demonstrate to the licensors that you can actually deliver it. So each of these courses here have had a syllabus developed by a faculty member, and you see we've got a set of as part of this, we're already developing 7 of the core courses, a set of general education courses, which students, of course, will be able to take into account for other concentrations later on as well. And then a set of courses that are specific to the social innovation and entrepreneurship concentration, a number of which will, of course, also be appropriate for other degree concentrations. So the important thing is that even though we have to apply for 1 degree concentration to start with, as students work through the first 2 years, they take the core courses and the electives, they actually won't need, as we develop more concentrations, they won't need to just do the social innovation entrepreneurship, because after 2 years we should have other concentrations available as well. But for the licensing process, we have to start with 1 specific concentration, which is what we're doing here. As part of that, we're really looking for what are smaller products that we can get into the market as soon as possible. Stepping into a new university that's different to the level that Ubiquity is, and signing up for a whole degree is quite a threshold to take for some people. So we've been looking particularly at certificates. How, out of all of those 40 courses that I just showed you, how could we create a number of different certificates? And this is the list of certificates that we've come up with for the undergraduate degree, which, as we produce more and more courses, more and more of these certificates become available. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And a certificate for us is composed of 4 3-credit courses. So you can see that, you could bundle 10 certificates would get you your 40 courses, your 120 credits for an undergraduate degree. At the same time as the BA, we've been putting together the MBA. The reason for that is it's a 1-year MBA, is because that's the cycle we can get through quickest and we can start to have graduates from. For the licensing process, it also means that we can have gone through a whole cycle very quickly, which for the some of the European contexts is important because you can't get accredited until you've actually run the cycle. So these are the 10 courses that we've put into the MBA launch pack. And you may notice that a number of them are similar to the BA. So, for example, it means that as we produce one of them, be it the BA or the MBA, we can just adapt a little bit of it, particularly the assessment system and the tasks and things, so that it can be applicable for BA or MBA, so that with certain material we can cut some corners and don't have to produce 2 completely separate courses, but can adapt it for BA and MBA. So let me just show you how the course production schedule looks, give you a sense of that. So what has informed us in terms of our thinking around what should we produce when is a lot to do with how quickly can we get smaller products available. People could, of course, for lifelong learning, just take a course. But if they're wanting to get into the academic side and really want to launch as a university, then having things like certificates available early on will mean that they can take a risk in a way, sign up for 4 courses, and know at least at the end of it they get a certificate. So, in the first phase, we'll be producing these 10 courses, and you'll notice there's a lot of overlap. So we've particularly chosen these as ones which can be adapted for the BA and for the MBA easily. And then once we move into a second phase, we'll finish off we'll get 10 courses completed for the MBA, which means we can offer the full MBA. And then we'll move on to this next set of BA courses. And once we've completed all of that, that unlocks another 4 certificates. You see, so by the time we've produced the 5th one here, at 5, we've already got another certificate. And then as we produce the 6th course, we've got another certificate, and so on. So we kind of unlock certificates as quickly as we can as we go through the course production process. That's the 3rd phase, where we produce extra MBA courses, so the students have some choice there, and complete this set of BA courses. So at this point, all the core courses and requirements for the BA are complete. And then in the 4th phase, all the MBA courses are complete. And we've unlocked 2 more certificates. And then for the 5th phase, we just finish it off and we've completed all the concentration courses. So one of the things that we've obviously tried to do is to produce the core courses and the general education courses early on, so that the students don't have to choose a specific concentration too early and then finish off the social innovation entrepreneurship concentration later. So if we go back to this, then some of you will have seen this format in the draft syllabus, but this is how we've been setting up a module. And so in the, there's 15 modules in the BA and 14 in the MBA. And they've broken them down into 4 sessions, so 4 little video pieces, as I said, 12 to 13 minutes each, and then those broken by 1 integration task and finished by an integration task, which are quizzes or journal activities primarily, although you can do other things. They're formative assessment, though, rather than summative. And a forum question for discussion, and then a self-development module, personal development module, at the end for each module. So in total, as for every course that they take 10 hours guided stroke supervised personal development work, which is broken into these different modules. Eventually, the personal development modules will stand parallel, and that whole process and track will stand parallel to the courses. But for this first phase, we're actually linking specific modules, personal development modules, to the courses. In the longer term, you can imagine that students are working on their own inequalities, and they just have to spend do 10 hours of that as part of a coursework, but they can completely personalize their personal development track once we've got enough modules produced. It's another module. Both these 2 come from Paul Taylor's course, actually, on marketing. Same setup, basically. So on the personal development side, it's, as I said, it's embedded into the course design. So even if you were to just take 1 module of a course at Ubiquity, you would be doing a personal development piece as part of that. So they get 10 hours guided per week, and then they're expected to spend 20 hours in practice. So Laurel has been pulling together, I think we've got up to 400 hours now of material, which we and people in our network could produce as part of as self-developed personal development modules, which primarily would be visuals with narration in the background. Unlikely for a lot of it to be video produced, although some might end up being that. But you can imagine kind of exercises, meditation exercises, visualization exercises, reflection exercises, those kind of things. If anyone's interested, I can share the latest list. So as we started thinking through this whole competency design, and there's been a lot of debate around credit hour versus competency based, and we really obviously felt drawn to the competency based because it feels a lot more intelligent to be asking, how do we what do the students need to learn, and how do we help them demonstrate that they've learned it, rather than how do we assure that they've spent a certain amount of hours watching video or watching a lecture. So we created 9 kind of ubiquity level competencies grouped into these 3 areas. So a competency on social innovation, entrepreneurship, society and culture, and the living universe as knowledge content, so knowing about those things. Related to the personal development, creativity, self-awareness, and personal leadership. And related to the missions or the projects, the action in the world, collaboration, communication, and whole systems design. And I'm actually going to talk through these because I think it's important for you to see what the higher level learning objectives are of the university as we're framing it at the moment. So the 3 in the knowledge area, social innovation, entrepreneurship, the ability to identify, conceptualize, and implement a radical innovation in society in such a way that all stakeholders are uplifted. The society and culture one, the ability to see and map patterns and dynamics across societies and cultures in such a way that you can act with the greatest insight and compassion. And the living universe one, which I think Paul has also described as the science one, the ability to conceive of oneself and one's context as a living system in such a way that all life is honored. The personal qualities, creativity. So Michael, you might have an opinion on this. This was my best effort at it. The ability to be present in the moment and give form to an impulse that arises inside of you in such a way that the previously implicit can be recognized by yourself and others. There's a lot in that. Self-awareness, the ability to know your inner motivations in such a way that you can show up to be of greatest service in any particular time or space while continuing to learn and grow. By the way, these just kind of, I just contemplated these and drew them up, so they're not, you know, they're ready, they're very much open to feedback. Personal leadership, the ability to steward yourself into meaningful action in the world in such a way that you bring your highest potential to each moment. And then the action in the world elements, collaboration, the ability to work co-creatively with others in such a way that each person's passion and ability is maximized for the good of the whole. Communication, the ability to listen deeply and communicate clearly in such a way that the essence of your intention is received by the other. And whole system design, the ability to design projects in such a way that all relevant parts and dynamics of the system, internally and externally, are taken into account. So if these are our 9 kind of meta competencies at Ubiquity, really everything else that we do should contribute to the development of these competencies for the students. Use of the word competency, you know, we thought a lot about because it's quite a buzzword at the moment, but and it's often used primarily to be talking about technical skills. So, you know, we're making the point that we have an integral competency framework that says the competencies can relate as much to interiors as to exteriors, to individual as to collective. So this was our kind of attempt to create these 4 different quadrant dimensions of what an integral competency framework might look like, and then to demonstrate that that kind of feeds the top 9 competencies that I just went through. So how do we then go about making sure that all competencies that we develop are aligned with these meta competencies? And that's where our nice holarchy concept comes in, where, you know, you could have competencies at all these levels, at your department and school level, at your course level, and within a course at a module level, and even right down to a session. So imagine that you create a, you know, a 12-minute video on something. What's what has the student learnt at the end of that? And sure, that's going to be a low-level competency on the Bloom scale, a recall competency, or maybe an understanding competency. But if we can start to name those, then I'll show you in a sec how we can then actually go about badging them, or actually, people being able to just take little snippets here and there as they start to explore it. But at the end of each thing, maybe take a short quiz and demonstrate that they've been able to recall something or been able to understand something, and get a little badge, for a session or module level. And then, of course, the competencies get harder to attain as you move up to course level or department level. We've been playing with the guild concept. So if you look at the right there, we've got different guild levels. So you could start to name these competencies: an initiate competency for when you get at a session level, or a novice competency when you get through taking a module, or an apprentice competency as you take a course, etc. And this is just an example of how this might work, taking one of the sessions and modules out of my leadership course. We start at the bottom. I have a 12-minute video which talks about the principles of emergence. So I would hope by the end of that, they've understood those basic principles, and you can do a little quiz to test it. That session is part of a bigger module called What is Transformation? And a learning outcome or competency at the module level would be to, at the end of it, students should be able to understand transformational change as compared to other types of change. So you can assess that. That module obviously is part of a course. And the course competency that it most relates to is to be able to express clearly the nature of transformation as compared to other types of change. And then you could see how that course competency is a subset of a department level competency, right? And kind of that feeds into, let's say, 5 that I've highlighted there, Ubiquity level competencies. So that's how we've been looking to embed the competencies. And just to give you an example of what that looks like in practice, because I've just been trying to do this for my course, leadership course. So I've worked through, here are the Ubiquity competencies, the 9 that we looked at. Here are the course competencies. And I've asked myself, which of the Ubiquity level competencies do I feel each of these course competencies contributes to? And then just gone into each module. So here are 2 module level competencies, and then a session level competency right down to a small video. So the second module makes a bit more sense. What is transformation? So at the end of that module, the student should be able to explain transformational change and its relationship to other types of change. At the end of watching the first small video, they should be able to name the key phases in natural life cycles. Or the next second video, outline the stages of Adiz's organizational life cycle and related leadership styles. So you can see that as you can really start to name and get granular around what it is we expect the students to learn at each of these levels. And at the smaller level, of course, it's going to be lower competencies lower down the Bloom hierarchy. But as we get further up at course and department level, particularly as we look at the mission side of it, where they're actually putting it into practice, we can bring in competencies at a higher level. So just a few last things then. This was just some thoughts about, Ken and his psychographs. Imagine that we had these 9 Ubiquity competencies, and you could see how a session or a module or a course, to what extent it contributes to which of the competencies. And so you could, the bars rise as students demonstrate sub-competencies that contribute to these competencies, and they could hit certain levels. And this is the guild level, but you could also put in a certificate, associate degree, undergraduate degree. So it's just a way of thinking about how we might, in a way, gamify or, make fun and visual the whole competency development piece. This is the badges example, where the initiate level competencies were, for example, just by having watched a 12-minute video, you start to, you gather a number of badges at that area. You've built some up to be module level competencies. And so you can see how you can how people can actually right down to the smallest level get badges for things, but also right up to the highest level. And you could see how the system might start to work that in the same way that Amazon does. For example, oh, we noticed that you've taken this module, this module, this module, and this module, and developed these competencies. Well, if you were just to take this module and this module, then you would get a veteran level competency, or you'd be able to complete a course in this area. So you can, obviously, using a recommendation engine, looking at what people have done so far, connect them to other material that would help them complement higher level and develop higher level competencies. So I won't spend too much time on this, but this is some of the work that Clint Foos has been doing with us, as we've been looking at how do we actually assess the competencies. And GPA we came up with on our last retreat was grades plus assessment. So this combination of grading as well as a deeper form of assessment. And the bigger vision is that we do a combination of a rubric grading with a developmental assessment system like Lectica and other modalities that combine. To start with, we're going to focus on the rubric grading, as that's the piece which is most realizable for us at the moment. So we're going to have feedback coming in from peers, peer work, quantitative in terms of how much stuff have they looked at or taken, self-assessment, and then the rubric grading system itself. And you notice this looks just like a bit like the hierarchy that I showed earlier. So like we've got a program objective, we have a set of course objectives, and then you build out the themes for your course objectives, and then for each of the theme you have a set of parameters. And this is how you can actually get granular as you look to develop an online assessment system that is not machine driven but people driven, but use the best of the technology to help the assessors and things get through it most effectively. So again, I've just been trying to do this for my course. So let me show you a bit what that looks like. So for example, I created the first creative assignment in my course comes after module 6. So I reckon it was contributing to mainly to two of the course competencies: the ability to report on your own and others' leadership capacity, and to build your transformational leadership by taking concrete steps. So this assessment was particularly checking their contribution to those competencies. So if you take the first one, to be able to assess and report on your own and others' leadership capacity, I picked out some themes there: leadership perception, your ability to be aware of your leadership motivations and behaviors, leadership self-expression, to be able to express holistic assessment of your leadership qualities. And then Clint suggested building in a more general one as well around creativity, given that the assessment itself allows for different forms, not just written, but other forms as well. So if I took that first sub-theme, leadership perception, then under the leadership perception, I just build out a number of parameters. So in this particular one, I've gone for a very integral set of parameters: quadrant awareness, developmental awareness, lines awareness, and change awareness. So, and let's just take within each of those, you then create the actual rubrics, which are the feedback that the students are actually going to receive. So under quadrant awareness, the ability to reflect on your leadership as it relates to all 4 quadrants. In your submission, we noticed that. Boom, boom, boom. And here, as an assessor, you basically get to choose one of these bits of text that then gets slotted into a kind of paragraph or two of personalized text feedback for the students. So this is what I've been working through from my course, and it's really very interesting and quite challenging initially, particularly to do. It really makes it's iterative. It makes you go back to the course itself. It makes you go back to the assessment itself. But it really makes you think about what is it I'm actually wanting the students to get out of this course. and how am I going to have them demonstrate whether they've developed that or not. So let's see. I think most of you have seen this before, which is the personal development framework we've been working on with Dylan Newcomb. There'll be a kind of holistic assessment that helps them to see which of these 8 areas or 32 modes of engagement they have strengths in, where they have limits, apart from anything else that will help them to think holistically about themselves. The coaching and mentoring piece is something we're really working on, that Laurel spent a lot of time on. And that is challenging when you're trying to do that at scale. So how do we do some one-to-many stuff? At the MBA, obviously we'd be able to sell extra modules of coaching, and Laurel's been developing a whole network of integral coaches, integrally informed coaches who could be part of that.
This is Kevin Bowman. Hi, Peter.
Hi, Kevin.
Was that you, Peter, or who was speaking?
Yeah, that was me.
I just got on the call.
Okay, great. We're just kind of finishing off the presentation, and then we'll be going into some conversation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. I thought maybe we were the Q&A. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. And so lastly, this missions piece, which are the change projects. Let me just show you, this is one way I've been thinking about it up until now, is how to make it as simple as possible for the students to be able to engage in this, that you could have different levels of mission, where the first one is simply change something in your behavior that would make you happier with yourself. Now, once you've cracked that, what it unlocks is change something in your household that makes it a nicer place to live. So you kind of set the threshold reasonably low for people to get used to this idea of trying to effect change. And then after they've spent, done up to 20, gathered 20 units within those first 2, so, 2 of each, say, then it unlocks something around this, change something in the way a group you're part of does things. So the group feels like it has more integrity and positive impact. And so it scales up into organizational and bigger challenges as people go through. So as you kind of work on the lower hanging fruit, as it were, in terms of change, it unlocks more complex challenges, which you get more points for, as it were. So that's one way I've been thinking about the missions. This is, I thought I had the map actually somewhere. Okay. This is just some images of the platform. I don't want to spend too much time on it now. But really, Griffin and his team are building a very beautiful online platform, kind of Facebook Plus, that has all the stuff you'd expect from a social network platform, individual blogs, collective blogs, ways of tracking conversations around courses, rating courses, giving feedback, rating people's contributions, getting credits for your contributions that you make on the platform, all sorts of different elements, which I think within the next couple of weeks, Griffin will be ready to demonstrate. So maybe a little further down the line, we'll be able to actually show you what it feels like to be on the platform. We'll be having students, as they take courses, arranged in pods of 21. So they'll be probably in international pods of 21 students. Those will be able to dock together in different ways, depending on what level you're wanting to have conversations at, just within your pod or within a bigger fleet, or within the whole kind of population who have ever taken that course, or within the whole student population. So we've just been playing with some geometric forms around that. And then, of course, another key piece is online, but what about in person? And a lot of the millennials we've talked to have said how important the personal contact is going to be as well. So we've been looking at different networks that could host that personal connection. And the Hub network is obviously one of them. There's these startup weekends. Ashoka obviously has these different campuses, these change campuses. But one of the things that's been emerging most recently is networks of properties, of pieces of land that are often underdeveloped, that could, if people went and lived there and worked there with a certain intention, they could actually develop resilient community on those places. So in the same way that Minerva is thinking about having their students located in buildings in cities across the world, imagine potentially a network of actually places on the land where students can be living, I don't know, 15 or 20 students at a time, trying to develop it into a resilient community and a social enterprise, learning about that stuff online, doing their personal development, but learning about collaboration, creativity, entrepreneurship in person with each other on those locations. And the map points you can see here are actually locations we either already have access to or very easily could have access to through our network partners. And there may be a whole new bunch of 28 properties in Canada coming online shortly, depending on conversations going on right now. The blue ones down here are Sri Lanka. It's a network of internet centers that were developed by the Asian American Development Bank. The green ones are through our partner GTech. So the accreditation question, just so you know where we are on that, we're following 3 tracks primarily. One through the California track, where we're already licensed as a university, and where through the Wisdom School we already have a PhD, an MA, and a DMin that we're licensed in. We've got an MBA, an application for the MBA in, and the BA one's nearly complete. That'll go in. But because you never quite know how things are going to go with something that's new when it hits the bureaucracy, we're also going to be putting applications in through Flanders in Belgium, which would give us EU accreditation, which is obviously very close to where we're based here in the Netherlands, and is a rapid, quite a fast process, and relatively cheap as well, and very open to the competency-based approach. So we're looking at that track. And the third track we're looking at is one which would make it a lot easier for us, and that's potentially to go offshore, register on an island somewhere, and in parallel set up a global accreditation council of people who carry legitimacy and authority in the education field, and start to develop a whole parallel system for accrediting the kind of education that we feel is needed. So we can go into that more if people are interested in the questions and answers. But those are the tracks that we're on at the moment. So that's a little summary. So as you know, affordability is a big part of the approach. We're looking at potentially per course, where you could have a course at $250, but also at subscription levels. Where you can have a free subscription where they just get to hang out on the platform. So let's say a low-level subscription where all the pre-recorded material is available, so they can go through and listen to videos, they can take quizzes, everything that doesn't require any human intervention, so it doesn't require faculty to be involved or teaching assistants or anything. And then the moment that you start, sorry, you can't see the titles here, the subscription levels, but the left one is just called Explore, and this one's Engage, and then the middle one is a Lifelong Learning, and the other two are academic, part-time, and full-time. So once you get into people actually wanting feedback and some kind of quality guarantee for the competencies that they've developed, then you get into another subscription level. But essentially, they could take as many courses as they want once they were at that subscription level. So that's another thing we've been playing with, is not just per unit selling courses and things, but also subscription like Spotify compared to iTunes, for example. So yeah, let me just spend just a moment on the alpha launch. So the first next step, which we're gearing up to right now, is that we've taken the Transformational Leadership Strategy and Governance course that I created for the MBA, and we're producing it right now. So we're trying to produce the minimum viable product for that course, to be able to test it with 100 to 200 students drawn from the different country partners, and from our group of about 50 millennials from across the world who have their own connections as well, who are part of our global design team, to test primarily the systems, to test the the platform to see how it works. Ideally also to get feedback on content, but that's really secondary. We're really trying to see how does the whole process work, how do the groups work, how does the social platform work, how does the content management system and all of that work, so that we start to actually get something out there and get some real feedback. And we're aiming to launch that around the 26th of April and have that run for 7 weeks. Recruitment seems to be going okay at the moment. It's free for people. The deal is that they basically give us feedback. We'll be putting in many feedback loops, and we're looking for people who are really very close to the university and our values, and who are not so much who are not going to be complaining that it's not up to scratch yet, because the point is that it's not meant to be up to scratch yet, but it's meant to be just enough to be able to get a sense of how it's going to work, get enough feedback to iterate another level. And we'll probably run an alpha again after that with the same course before moving on to a beta in September, and hopefully launching the degrees fully in January next year. So that's where we're at. And now, yeah, people got questions or comments or thoughts, then shoot, let's see. And I can share this version of the deck as well with you if you want.
Peter, this is Paul Ray.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, I really want a copy of that deck because I'm trying to put something new together for investors, and there's some really superb slides on it.
Okay.
One of the things that worries me a lot is the amount of time that it looks like is required to grade people on the competency stuff. A lot of human effort looks like it's going into it rather than machine coding and so on. Have you given any thought to what happens as the scaling up of this approach starts happening?
Yeah, the creative assignments are what get evaluated by people, assessed by people. So there's normally 2 or 3 of those per course, and the mission report that they write, linking their change project to the course content. And it takes time to build the rubric, the text-based rubric system, because I've been doing it. But once you've built it, it's actually going to be very quick to use. That's what I'm seeing, because we'll be maximizing the technology, but we'll be, and as we go through iterations of the course, it will refine the assessment system as well, so it's not static. But my sense is from once it's up, for the teaching assistants and things, it'll actually be very quick to use, and that's what will enable us to scale. But it'll be quicker to use the more time and care is put into the initial design and development of the system. So that's what I'm noticing at the moment.
Well, what I'm worrying about is the amount of judgment calls that may be required, and whether students can evaluate themselves at all if they're not particularly competent in the area. You may remember the studies that have been done on what incompetence really comes down to, is that people can't evaluate themselves and really can't even understand the ideas of what makes competence. So if we get one-sided students, people who are techies from GTech, for example, for whom personal development may be the last thing in the world they want to think about, it may be a very difficult slog. Or there may be cultures in which being self-revealing on paper or an impersonal thing is a very anathema kind of idea. Mm-hmm. So I worry about this, the judgment calls and the personal revelation and the personal competency issues as they play out in different cultures.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. We're going to have to really, particularly in the alpha and beta tests, try to get a sense for and get feedback through the focus groups of how the different cultural groups are responding to what we're looking for. I don't think, I mean, obviously we have some idea from the studies that have been done so far, but I don't think we'll really know until we test it also for this generation. So yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about having people on the ground in India and Sri Lanka and Russia, is that they'll be able to actually talk to the folks who go through the courses, and we'll be able to get some hopefully very personal feedback on how they're experiencing it. But yeah, absolutely, that's very much on our radar screen.
Thank God for focus groups, then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul
and Eche have been doing a great job pulling that group together.
Yeah, one of the things I would recommend is that you get people who have a lot of skills at eliciting information from people to do the investigation of our alpha launch. Because a lot of people who are very good at formulating a business are not necessarily good at eliciting information from people. It's not the same skill set.
Can I make a point? This is Kevin.
Hi, Kevin. Yeah.
Yeah, just on a related issue, I think this presentation is, I think, impressive about how much it's developed since the last time. We saw the presentation, and I think a lot of the attention has been in that connection between sort of institutional support for cross-departmental assessment and activities and missions and things that are coming from the institution, and how that's going to complement the courses. And that seems to be a big challenge about, we're talking about learning lines in general, and then we're talking about specific learning lines within people's disciplines. And when you assess people in a particular field, then how do we know that they have this sort of competency to be assessed across the university? So I think it's very interesting the way this is developing, and the way you're thinking about this. But I think that's also a challenge for you to continue it.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I don't think I quite got understood the question you were holding. So if you want to, but I'd love to talk to you maybe offline more about that. If you want to try to frame it in an email or something, then we can.
Oh, you bet.
Delve into it more.
Yeah. Just mostly a comment there on. I think you're developing along these lines very well, and okay. Yeah, I mean, just something to think about.
Yeah, but there's something to think about. I'm not sure I quite got. So please, do drop me a line about that. I'd love to, if you're picking up.
Yeah, well, it's the assessment part of it, and as you were saying, the template that there's there are rubrics for assessing learning in competencies, but that's not necessarily. I don't know if that's general competencies or if those are specific to the courses. And I just I'll follow up with the question by email.
Okay, I got it. I think I got it. But yes, it'll be at multiple levels, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Peter, this is Tom McGarity.
Hey, Tom.
Hi, I've just got a comment. It's kind of a comment, kind of a question, which is normally what I do, I guess. It's the detail with which you presented the building of a course makes me wonder what the teacher's creativity has to do with any particular course. It almost sounds like you follow these very defined steps, but take your area of expertise and plug them in. It's almost like you've created something that requires just simply plugging in global economics or global this or leadership that or communication this, innovation that. I don't really understand what a teacher is at this university.
That's a great and obviously a bigger question, Tom. But you're right. There's a template in terms of the course design where obviously there's the creativity in terms of the content, how you're going to present the content, and design the assessments and everything else around that, and your creative assignments. But yeah, the role of faculty when you come to competency-based online learning is different to a traditional role for faculty, and it's really about, first of all, asking, what is it that I want the students to learn or develop through this course? How am I going to, and break that down into, you know, larger course level learning outcomes and then sub-learning outcomes. And then to ask, how am I going to have the students demonstrate whether they have developed those qualities or competencies? And how are we going to assess that? And then, once you've got that in place, it becomes to start to provide the input through either your own pre-recorded material or reading or pointing to external videos or learning resources as a starter to basically say, okay, these are the kind of things I suggest from what I know at the moment that you look at as a student to be able to help you develop those competencies. But what will eventually happen, of course, is students will find their own stuff out there and they'll recommend it to each other and they'll rate it and they'll rank it, and you'll get a whole ecology of learning resources that students will find works best to help them develop certain competencies. So it's no longer the role of a faculty member to be the sole expert in a content area. The role of the faculty member shifts to being the one who designs the learning habitat for the students, obviously providing their expertise where they have it, but certainly not as a sole expert in that area. So you're right to identify it as a shift, and there's been quite a lot written about that and how difficult it is for traditional faculty to actually move out of that role of being the sage on the stage and the mistakes or the guide by the side. But yeah, that's, if I've understood your question correctly, that's how I'm seeing that shift.
Peter, this is Michael Schwartz. Hi.
Hi, Michael.
Yeah, so a follow-up with that. I mean, this is very interesting. I think the presentation's great, and it's a real challenge for someone like myself who teaches at a face-to-face university. The one that's very exciting. And it's a follow-up to the last question, and it's this issue of disciplinary expertise. You know, in other words, there are well-founded 200-year-old communities of disciplinary expertise, you know, in Charles Sanders Peirce's sense, or in Appel's sense, or Habermas's, in which there are trainings that say you're a philosopher or you're a biochemist. And then there are peer-reviewed productions of knowledge, various levels, which the community authenticates as legitimate. And my question is, if students are going to be running around and accessing what works for them in learning, how does one control disciplinary competencies and disciplinary expertise if the teacher is surrendering the role of what to go look at?
Well, if I've understood it correctly, the way I see it is that the teacher determines the competencies and the way in which that competency is assessed. So the focus shifts to have the students develop the qualities or competencies that we're looking for them to develop, away from you have to read this, this, and this. So if the question, you know, so that you control the quality, as it were, by making sure that your assignments and assessments are appropriate to assess those particular competencies. And I think obviously there's a place still for recommending, and we even have in our syllabi required reading. But can we ever control whether the students have actually read it or not? No. The only thing we can control is whether they, to the best of our ability, is whether they've developed the competency that we want them to develop. So sure, they may, if they just go and look at a couple of YouTube videos and don't have any further expertise in the area, and then take the assessment, then one would hope that they would not do very well in the assessment, and the system would say, go back and maybe you should actually read some of the stuff that we suggested you read, and study it, and then come back and try again. So that's how I understand it working.
Thank you. I'm really trying to download the actual micro procedures. So my question probably was ill-formulated. I think I have a better sense of it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I don't want them going off and reading anything on the internet and thinking that's sufficient. There are really fantastic things in various disciplines that they really should be directed to.
I'm not saying that we don't direct them to stuff. Absolutely, we do. We say, like, this is our recommended or even required reading or learning resource list. But the reality is that they will also go and find other stuff which maybe we're not aware of, some of which may be good and some of which may be junk.
Okay.
But the key focus is, have they developed that competency that we said we wanted them to develop? How do we assess that?
I'm clear. I'm sorry I wasn't clear in the beginning.
No.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks very much. Okay. Thank you.
How did this go down with you, Greg?
Yeah, actually I have a question. I'm just wondering in terms of the timeline. I mean, you're talking about different phases, and I'm wondering what those phases, when each one of those is going to be completed, and also when the other degrees would, concentrations would come online.
It's a great question, and one I would love to be able to answer. I mean, our current plan, as I think I said, is to have the first alpha in April. That'll run for 7 weeks, and 4 to 6 weeks after that, run it again. And around end of September, beginning of October, run the beta with hopefully 4 courses by then, and then be able to offer the first full semester starting in January. And so by the end of 2015, we should have at least 15 courses produced. So a lot depends on 2 things, really. One, investment, how quickly investment comes in, because obviously course production is one of the major costs. And the other one is licensing as well, is how quickly can we get some form of licensing in place. And then what does the market tell us? How are students responding? What kind of material would they want to see next? What kind of courses seem to be exciting them most, and what is also getting picked up in the non-formal education side. So people would be able to just take courses without academic credit as well. What's popular in that area? So I guess it'll be a combination of, licensing is broader for the whole thing, so it'll probably be a combination of market feedback, how students respond, and investment. I mean, if kind of millions drops out of the sky tomorrow, which isn't impossible, then we may be off and running, and before you know it, we'll have a department on international affairs and politics next year.
Great.
Part of it is also one of our principles is dream big, start small, and scale organically. So that we really, create little pieces and then test them out, and then that creates a pattern which we can then grow out from. So we want to make sure that we don't put the cart before the horse, as I say.
One constraint though is that you want to be able to have the students, the first official cohort that's paying tuition, they need to be able to complete a degree. MBA in 2 years or the BA in 4 years, whatever the promise is. So
yeah, that's right.
Scaling up requires. So I understand that you want to get it in great shape before you launch, but then there's also the other side of the learning by doing.
Absolutely.
And getting it, not relying as much on the investors, and getting it out there and getting some tuition in too. So
that's the balance.
Things that kind of come to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly, put your finger on it. That's the balance. It's really between those two, making sure we've got something which is good enough quality out there to get people excited, but is just the minimum viable product, so that we can get the feedback we need and get something to get to market and be generating income and not be completely dependent on that.
Yeah. I mean, like the social networking aspect of it is exciting. I was wondering if you have anything in development there.
Oh yeah, I mean I can send you. We have a set of like 5 slides which are screenshots, kind of mock-ups.
Oh.
The platform is really being built at the moment, and as I said, I think this is partly what Griffin is going to be demonstrating to us over the next couple of weeks. So as we move into the alpha launch, and I haven't cleared this with Paul, so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure we would be able to give our faculty access to any social platform that we had, so you could kind of kick the tires and test it out and give us feedback and things. Yeah, don't you think, Paul? Test if he's still actually there. He may not be. But yeah, as soon as
well, that would be great. I mean, it sounds like that's an investment that could pay off.
Well,
Peter?
you know what? Just to come back to that point, as I'm talking to potential partners, by which I mean other existing institutions who want to put stuff online, I think really one of the core things that we're creating here is a really good learning and social innovation platform and collaboration platform. And so as I talk to Schumacher College in England, who do a lot of sustainability stuff, where you could think of maybe CIIS or a number of other education providers who are smaller but are in the same kind of area as we are, same value set. When I show them what we're building, they're kind of, well, there's no point in us trying to create a platform. Why don't we just use your platform, and can you create a kind of habitat for us and our students, which we can hang out in, and then our students can also be part of the bigger community, and then the bigger community can take our courses and our students can take other courses that are out there. And so you really begin to build, create a space for the broader movement as a whole to be able to be part of. So that's really how we're seeing it develop, is the platform play, where Ubiquity becomes a platform for many different providers who share the same values, essentially.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for these network externalities that can capture these cultural sales, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, Paul's back. I noticed. Yeah, Paul, I was just checking. You kind of have closest contact with Griffin and developments. Is the over the next, or in April, end of April, May, as we get to the alpha launch, I'm imagining that the social platform will be available, and that we'd be able to create a space for faculty to be able to go in and kick the tires and test things out. Is that right?
Yeah, it will be our first, beta experiment for the social platform.
Yeah, so that we can expect that in, if things go according to plan, currently in May time, right? Turned on and then muted. You just muted yourself again. I think he said yes anyway, so we'll take that as a yes.
And Peter, when would
yes,
you
the answer is
expect
yes.
When would you expect that we can see the way you put together a competency developed course?
Well, I mean, if you're interested in just looking at how I've been working it out, I'm happy to share with you the links to the spreadsheets I've been creating with the various competency outlines and assessment rubrics and stuff for my course, just to be able to get a sense of it, if you like.
Well, yeah, I'm going to be early in this process, and the sooner I know what it's like, the better it is.
Well, I'd be happy to. It might require just a little bit of talking through, so you kind of see, know what's what. But I'd be happy to show you some of that, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Peter, that gets back to my question.
Okay, Tom. Yeah.
I'm following up on Paul's question. What you just said, your answer to Paul, is what I'm questioning. It sounded like the flow chart, or the whatever we call it, let's call it the flow chart of your course, is basically the flow chart of any course at Ubiquity. That's what I was trying to point out. That because it's been built so step by step in a manner that it all has to kind of like fold together. I wonder what any other teacher would do, but as far as their own creativity. But I'm not so sure that's your answer anymore. It's confusing.
Well,
It's confusing.
The content is of course completely different, obviously, Tom, for all the different courses. So you know, as you think through for yourself for your own course, or Paul for his course, that what are the key learning outcomes for the course, which you guys have already had to do for the syllabi, and then start to think through, okay, so for this particular module, what's the key learning outcome and competency here, and how does that tie into the course competencies? And then start to think through, okay, as in my assessment, in my creative assignment here, which competencies am I trying to test, and how am I going to have them demonstrate those, and what are the different rubrics I'm going to have? So all of that's obviously going to be completely different for each course, but the basic assessment infrastructure, let's say the skeleton which will hold it all, is similar. Yeah, obviously we can't create multiple different assessment technologies.
Well, just to follow up on that, I'm teaching basically what's an orientation course, which is getting people to learn to see the big picture and think strategically about it. I don't really expect that there's a whole lot of overlap in terms of course content or technique in what Peter's doing and what I'm doing, Tom. But I expect to be able to hook together a bunch of small modules, extremely small modules, in ways that are unique to the way I want to teach. But I think it's probably going to require some systems thinking on my part as to what all the little pieces are that have to be hooked together, like a Lego set or something, to make it work. And the sooner I can get at that, the better, because I suspect it's going to be a long, drawn-out process.
Thank you, Paul. Right, we're getting to the end of the hour and a half. Anybody else? Any thoughts? Oh, Dwayne's on. Hello, Dwayne. Muted, so maybe he's busy with something else. Anybody else? Any comments?
There we go. Yeah. Greetings.
Hello. How long have you been with us?
Yes, I didn't know about the call. Or I would have been on earlier.
Okay, no worries. I can send you. I think I noticed that somebody was recording it, so Eche may have been recording it.
Okay,
so
great.
We may have a version.
Yes, we do have a
Is that
recording.
right, Eche?
That's correct.
Oh, very good. So great, we can make that available. Paul, anything else you want to add, like in terms of the Paul Taylor, in terms of the upfront framing, just that I talked through the kind of branding and positioning piece, but was there anything you wanted to add to that might be of relevance to the faculty before we leave? Right. Okay, well, let's leave it there for now. Thanks very much for covering. And if anybody's got any questions further or want to look at any of the materials and things that I sent, then just let me know, and we'll make the recording available, and then take it from there.
What about the presentation, Peter? Are you going to send it out as well?
Yeah, well, we've got to record it, a narrated version, I think, now that Eche's recorded it, but I'll also make a PDF of the presentation available to you.
Great.
Okay. Can you send us the deck?
Yes.
Peter, this is Paul. I was trying to get off mute for the last couple of minutes. I couldn't find my control panel. I wouldn't add from a positioning, but I'd just love to, from the next steps, of when it makes sense for this group to reconnect. Would love to talk to them about our ecosystem vision, and so let's just, maybe we can do that by email thread, but it would be great to just talk about a community of content providers coming together. Maybe that will be one of our next practical gathering points for this community.
Yeah, good idea. That would be good. Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. We'll get some stuff to you, and as I say, if you've got any questions or further ideas, then please let us know.
Great,
Thanks,
thank you.
Peter. Thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.